Today, it's all about vampires. Hope it doesn't suck. Welcome to Gothiture, where we talk about dark romanticism and Gothic literature. Now, cheesy dad jokes aside, I really do hope you enjoy the video. Today, we are going to get a brief introduction into vampires in Gothic literature and talk about the literary birth of the vampire. Now, vampires in our modern world are seen as fearsome, dangerous, yet mysterious creatures. They are hated and sometimes the objects of compassion and even love. These creatures that have died a mortal death to become what they are caught between the same constructs as living beings, day and night, and heaven and hell, just from a different perspective. While the vampire is believed to have been around for centuries, it was not until the 19th century that they emerged as literary superstars, or dark heroes even. As mentioned in my previous video, Gothic as a genre of literature came to be in 1764's The Castle of Otranto, and was one of the most read forms of fiction for about 70 years before losing readership to authors such as Charles Dickens. 52 years into the 70-year run was the birth of the literary vampire, according to scholars. Remember, I am not talking about myths and legends involving vampires from around the world. I'm talking about the birth of the vampire as a character, an antagonist of the story being told. The origins of the literary vampire can be traced to one specific night in Switzerland, June 16th, 1816 to be exact, where a group of friends, Percy Shelley, Mary Wollstonecraft, John Polidori, and Claire Clairmont, were gathered by the fireside to hear Lord Byron read aloud from Phantasmagoriana, or as Google translated it, Phantasmagoriana, or a collection of stories of apparitions and spirits. A book of German tales translated into French and published in 1812. After, they decided to write their own stories. That stormy night of friends having a good time came some of the most important Gothic texts, including Lord Byron's fragment of a novel, John Polidori's The Vampire, and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. In Byron's fragment of a novel, we see the rough draft of a vampire tale, which never evolved. Though it shares a similar plot with Polidori's vampire, major differences include the evidence of outright vampirism. One could argue that they are not very similar at all because of that. When we talk of vampirism, in this case, we are talking of things that make a traditional vampire: active nights, predatory behavior, and the drinking of blood. Not the modern teenage vampire trends of the last 20 years of enchanted jewelry and diamond skin. I realize I may have people upset at that. I'm not saying it's not Gothic in nature. I'm saying they do not act like the more traditional vampire that I'm referring to. Specifically, the aversion to sunlight and the need to stay out of it to avoid death. These sanguinary creatures later become a tool authors use to warn of changes in the world or society at large. Before I go, I want to talk a little more about the term sanguine. It's one of my favorite words that we don't really hear much anymore. It has many definitions, including eager hopefulness and confidently optimistic. But keeping with the theme of the video, I will be focusing on the information as it pertains to vampires. Now, sanguine, the definition meaning blood, bloodthirsty, blood red, or consisting or relating to blood. In vampire mythology, there are different types of vampire, one being the sanguine vampires. These vampires are the ones that feed off of blood for sustenance. Now, this vampire that most people have heard stories of thanks to classics like Nosferatu and Dracula. They are known for their speed, sharp minds, and powerful presence. The key thinkers behind this concept seem to be the ones that perpetuating the vampire myth, such as the accusers and authors, such as Bram Stoker and the more modernly Anne Rice. They all helped to concrete the idea of the sanguine vampire through their novels and brought it to the mainstream. This pertains to the studies of vampires, since this was the main type of vampire written about and talked about when the stories and myths were being spread around. More modernly, there are what are called psychic vampires, which feed off the energy of a person rather than the blood. It is important to recognize this distinction because as we move forward in the study of vampires coming into the 19th and 20th centuries, the psychic vampire will be making itself known and the difference will need to be established. Humans would often go to sanguine vampires for a chance at immortality, knowing that they would have to be willing to give of their blood and, depending on the myth, go through an extreme amount of pain or drift into death to wake up immortal. Sanguine vampires are also the most feared, as they would be the ones to inflict pain and show and drink blood, something most people at the time believed to have stayed in the body. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Good night.